Sit down and let me sing you a song of sorrows, of the war between the men of iron and the men of waters, and of how the great kingdoms of the Easterlands fell into ruin. Let me sing you the song of the fall of empires. The first great men of the East came from the island of Malia. They called themselves the children of the cunning fox, the Malazi. They looked upon all the riches of the world with lusty eyes, and knew in their heart of hearts that all would belong to them. The Malazi were great traders and seamen, and valued themselves on their wit and their guile. The sailors would laugh and say, "One tongue is worth more than 10 fingers, or 100 swords." Seeing what could be gained, the 12 strongest tribes joined and formed the Empire of the 12 Sisters of Malai. The Malazi Empire gained in wealth and power on the wit and luck of its citizens. They settled colonies, gained alliances, and grew more and more bold with their sea dancer fleets. Many wars they even won without ever swinging a sword. Even the savage tribes of the western steppes, the Zimrak, and their petty kings bent the knee, and in return were given back their kingdoms to rule in the name of the Malazi Empire. But just as a new power was growing in the south, a new power had emerged in the north. The Renran gang had come out from the far west, exiles from their own lands, and with them they brought their knowledge and their weapons, as well as their greatest secret, the making of white iron. Most importantly, they brought their worldkin, the belief in the wheel and of the hammer, and of the cog and of the gear, and that the world was the birthright of the strong, and that iron was stronger than flesh. Settling in the icy wastelands around the Lion's Mouth, the land of Pabra, the Renran gang traded with the dusky Southrons of the mainland, the Zimrak, for food and wood and access to their hills for mining. The soil was poor and scarce was food, and they at first had little to trade, but their most precious of precious things, their white iron. The Zimrak laughed and struck hard deals for the fabled metal. For all its sheen, the milk-colored Westermen could not eat their sacred steel. But the Renran gang were patient and skilled, and their craft and industry eventually managed to make them rich and strong. Soon the steel-clad armies of the Kingsmiths were marching out against the Zimrak, and although outnumbered greatly, they won battle after battle. The Kingsmiths had a weapon. Great giants of the north dragged into battle in chains to fight for them. The brittle bronze weapons of the Zimrak could not cut or dent the shining armor of the Rahan gang knights, and the fearsome giants scattered them like children. Swords of white iron drunk deep on the blood of the Southrons that day. The Kingsmiths took back their sacred metal from the Zimrak savages, and soon the gaudy crowns of the petty kings decorated the council chambers of the Kingsmiths. Only the Malazi stood between them and total control of the East. Soon the armies of steel had marched as far south as the Ashan Desert. They expected the watermen of Malaya to fall just as soon as the others, but their silent ranks of the Malayans gave them pause. They also feared as they saw their giants wilting and dying under the burning desert sun. The dusky Malayan soldiers wore great cloaks, as bright and vulgar as parrots' wings, and in their hands they held the bright glimmer of white iron swords. The Alchemaculi, the most secret of sects, had copied the secret of forging white iron, and they had armed all the Fox legions with the finest swords. For the first time, white iron clashed with white iron, and the blood of Malayan and Renran gang mingled in the hot desert sun. Giants scattered Malayans like autumn leaves, while the Alchemaculi smashed their ranks with the full fury of their blasting powders. Both sides faced greater losses that day than any day before it, and both retreated, licking their wounds. The Kingsmiths locked themselves away behind white iron doors, and plotted their final victory, for they had made a secret weapon, the iron-forged king. Just the orphan son of some peasants, but who had been raised from the cradle by the greatest scholars in the land. He was trained to be the ultimate conqueror, to fear no living man, and to lead his legions to victory. But across the sea, his enemy, the Jester King, laughed and japed, and weaved his clever plans and schemes. Behind his laughing mask, cold eyes glimmered. He was a trickster and a deceiver who manipulated his way to the throne of Malaya. The Jester King had no great proficiency for military strategy or strong leadership. His craft was tricks and japes and lies that ravaged the Steel Legions in the war. As the war raged, he sailed with the Sea Dancer fleet to the furthest side of the world, the land of Malath. His ships returned laden with the army of the Jarks, beastmen and lizard folk who ate the flesh of men and were fearless in battle but merciless in victory. The mercenary Jarks turned the tide of the continent against the Rinra gang, and the final victory was within Malaya's grasp. But at the instruction of the Iron-Forged King, at the heart of the Lion, he had been forging the Ironclad Fleet, the first navy the Rinra gang ever built. With their holds laden with battle-hard giants, the Iron Fleet sailed to the island of Malaya and down their Peace River. At the first city of the Foxlord, he unleashed his legions. Malaya's armies burned, their fleets burned, the great cities of Malaya burned. In a few weeks, the Malazi had fallen to despair. Their strength was smashed for all time. But the Jester King could not be found. Little did the victorious Rinra gang know that he was planning his final and most terrible trick against them all. He had traveled to the distant north, to the homeland of the giants, and rallied a great army of the fearsome beast. Their rage had grown like the tides with the enslavement of their peoples. Until one night, they marched south.